Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of 12 Step Crashers podcast. I think this is episode number 10. Uh, it is 10. Okay, I see your hands.
Yeah,
Put them
it
down.
is.
Episode 10. I'm Eric. Ev is here, and we have a guest tonight, Michelle.
Hello.
And before we go further,
Yeah.
I would just like to make an announcement. I work tomorrow, so healthy boundaries. Let's not make it a 3-hour episode. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So, let's start this up. Michelle,
Yes.
I'm curious about your path to recovery because Eric and I, we have a similar path in the sense that we went to recovery. We were already accepting that we will never use again.
Mm.
Why were you entering rehab?
The other option was to stay in jail. As I said earlier, it was because of my drug use that I ended up in a situation where someone got very angry at me and kind of took something that I texted to the police and somehow convinced his girlfriend that I was a threat to her life, even though I've never harmed anything in my entire life. I'm so harmless. I think the thing that I said that they took is that I have mental health issues and I know I'm overreacting. I was trying to explain myself, but I was also on a lot of drugs at the time and I'm bipolar, so I was manic and on stimulants. So, and I'm not a person who gets angry. I've been angry about 3 times in my life. And so when I did get angry, I got really fucking angry, and I have have had every personality disorder almost. So I definitely had borderline traits still at that point. So, yeah, it had never occurred to me to regulate my emotions at any point in my life. I didn't know it was possible. I was so detached from my feelings, they were so painful, that I was just unaware of my feelings and unaware of other people's feelings. And, I was seen as selfish or insensitive or stuff like that, but it's because I was so hypersensitive to everything that I would just shut down and block things out. So I'm over 40 now and I was basically, I still feel like I'm a child, but I was basically looking to my parents for help, but I'm at the point in my life where those roles are supposed to be switching, So the real reason I decided to make a change in my life is because I don't want to be a burden on my parents. It is for me, cause my life is a lot easier, but that's the thing that that was the real motivator. You can't do it for somebody else, but I also had the motivation of maintaining my freedom, which is very important to me. Cause it's the thing of having gratitude and accepting, being thankful for all the shitty things that have happened to you. Cause it was in jail that I realized how privileged and lucky I am to be who I am, where I am, and have access to a good lawyer, the money to pay for one, cause not everyone is in that situation. And that's when it dawned on me that I had so much to be grateful for, and I had just been ungrateful for my whole life. Because I was hurt, I was so focused on the bad that I couldn't see any good. I mentioned this to Eric before, I was very cynical. It was part of my personality. I saw kind of happy, joyful people as being kind of lame. A lot of people are embarrassed about being an addict, but I would never been embarrassed about it. It's very common.
Just to reframe a bit, so we don't lose the audience. So you were originally sent to jail because, you were hanging around these people that were not looking for your best interest, to say the least, as use the fact that you have mental health issues to make you look crazy and get you charged with whatever you got charged with. So you were in jail, and from there, what happens? The lawyer works to have a route for you to go to rehab?
Yeah, so there's conditions of release. There was no trial. I wasn't convicted of anything. I was just being held. So it's bail or whatever, the conditions of release. And my conditions were I had to stay at Heritage for a month. And when I was there, I didn't choose to come here, but I might as well take advantage of this opportunity while I'm here, And I had kind of started to detox, I suppose, while I was in jail. I was there for 5 days, didn't even have access to my medication, And so that clarity was starting to come to me even at that point. And I also had, this, like I ended up in jail because sort of like a lapse, because my main, like the drugs that I was on when I originally got charged, like I was taking a shit ton of Xanax and like trucker speed. Well, I had, no self-control, nor did I sleep or eat ever. And I was miserable and I was terrified. So I was just like, having drugs be the focus of my life was the easiest thing for me to do at the time. I had gone through a lot of trauma in a short period of time before the pandemic, but like after the pandemic, I wanted to rejoin the world, but I was too scared. So that's why I turned to drugs, because like I had is benzos and like the thing that I say that they do is they eliminate fear, but they also eliminate your ability, your judgment, you just do. Thankfully, I'm not a terrible person. I never hurt anybody. Like the worst thing I did was be like passive aggressive and, like really juvenile stuff. But I got in trouble, and it was a good thing I got in trouble, because otherwise I wouldn't have changed. And I have changed drastically.
Well, so let's just step back again. You get the heritage. I'm just kind of curious because you said you were court mandated to go there. You didn't necessarily want to be there. So what happened once you arrived? How was your experience, and what did you do when you were there?
At the beginning, I was miserable. I didn't realize I was in withdrawal. You take it off of everything to like establish a baseline that made me like gravitate towards getting the illegal versions of them, right? So for the first 2 weeks, I didn't sleep. I thought it was the mattresses, which I guess like helped, because like I didn't think, oh, I'm in withdrawal. I thought, oh, these mattresses are shitty. But I was like sleeping on the floor in yoga mats. And, I was miserable. I did not want to be there at all. I didn't like going to meetings. I didn't want to get out of bed. I just wanted to stay in my room and not talk to anybody. I have always been a person with trust issues, and I still do. I'm working on that right now, and I'm letting people in a way that I never have before, but I'm still not there yet. So at that point, I really didn't trust anybody. That whole incident with that person who I thought was my friend betraying me, really sealed the deal. I already didn't trust people beforehand, and I didn't trust people because I didn't understand how to read people's emotions. I also am on the autism spectrum. Like there's like a laundry list, but like these things have all been like a blessing and a curse, because there are ways, because there are positive aspects of all these things, but we focus on the negative ones. And if we're able to deal with the negative aspects of all these like conditions, they actually become very useful, because like in my opinion, they developed as survival mechanisms. And it's just, we are in different environments. Technology like advances so fast that we don't know how to use them properly anymore, because they're not suited for the situations that we're in.
If I can just interrupt you, essentially, for what I'm hearing is that you didn't know much about yourself or your ability to self-regulate. When you got there, you probably didn't know all that you're saying right now about your autism, your personality disorder trait, or bipolar disorder, right?
I had like always had a variety of like diagnoses. Like no one could agree. It was like mixed traits and stuff like that. I had always thought I was bipolar. Doctors did not believe me, because, or another issue, like there's so many aspects to the story. For most of my life, I was very, very, very overweight. Like fluctuated up and down, but I've lost over 100 pounds multiple times. I became like a junkie level drug addict. I had a small coke phase, and I smoked a lot of weed before, but really to the point where it was destructive. That didn't start until I was in my mid 30s. I think I was like 35 or something like that. Like I had a very delayed adolescence.
Eating disorder was your primary addiction before drugs, right?
Oh, that's since I'm 5 years old, and that was a coping mechanism. Eating does, like, it calms you down. It puts you to sleep. Like, to this day, if I eat a big meal, I fall asleep, And anyways, it ended up, like, my weight became such a problem. It's the same as drugs. Like, I didn't focus on anything else, any of the other problems in my life, because all I could think about was, I'm fat. That was my only thing that I thought about all the time. And I just did not realize that, I guess it was a way of not having to deal with my other problems because I didn't have the self-awareness that I've developed. And that's so key because, I didn't know how to interact with the world because I wasn't aware of my feelings and I didn't understand other people's feelings. That kind of lack of ability to communicate just pushed me further away from people because I obviously felt misunderstood because I was literally misunderstood. A lot of people have a hard time loving themselves or knowing who they are. That was never a problem for me. I liked myself, but I did not trust other people to feel the same way about me. You know, I didn't mind being different. I liked the person who I am. I was never the type of person who tried to fit in. It's just not something that occurs to me. It's not natural to me.
So, Michelle, that's interesting because that's not a common trait amongst addicts to be comfortable with themselves. But there's one thing that correlates with my story, Eric's story, pretty much anybody that we add on the podcast, is that lack of connection. You may like yourself, but you're still isolated from others. And as you mentioned, there's a matter of trust to other people, but also kind of being trapped within yourself, right? In that eating disorder
Yeah.
and whatever came after that.
I think it was really fear. I was afraid of people. I was afraid of getting hurt. I have like major fear of rejection. So I didn't want to get close to people because I had been hurt before. I don't even know exactly in what capacity because I've had this my whole life. This is real early childhood trauma. It's also one of the traits of like borderline. All of these personality disorders, there's a lot of overlap between them, you know? So like it's hard to tell where one starts and another one ends. But it's still helpful in understanding how your brain operates.
I want to go back now. You just kind of clarified a few things. You didn't trust people. You kind of isolated. You weren't used to being around people. 2 weeks into Heritage. Now you're thrust in a situation where, like you said, you want to stay in your room, but you can't. You're forced to go to the workshops and you're forced to be around people and they're strangers. So what happened now? Did anything ever click at the time you were staying there?
Absolutely. Usually what happens to me, I find one person who I trust and then I hold on to them and often overwhelm those people. But in the situation that I was in, that didn't really happen. On initial first impression, people don't like me, but then they get used to me and they get to see who I really am. I think that's different now. It isn't all the time because I'm not always remembering to be the best version of myself but I see the difference in my interactions with people like in real life, you know. I saw my communication skills as a real issue and that was one of the first things that I focused on. And I thought about why people didn't listen to me. And I understood because I said too much, too fast. People would just zone out and not listen. I have a lot of interesting things to say, but I have to choose my words wisely. I have to decide what to say, when to say it, and who to say it to. Those are important things for me to remember. Because my brain goes so fast. My mouth is just trying to keep up with it. I've learned now that not everything in my brain has to come out of my mouth. I didn't know how balance, control, moderation. I didn't understand these things at all. And that's...
So all the concept of sobriety.
Yeah. And for me, it's like I've had eating disorders on both ends. Like I've been like an overeater and I've also been anorexic. Like everything with me is extremes, like my whole life, you know? What I have to do is find that balance and stay in the middle. And like, you know, sometimes I veer off this way and sometimes I veer off this way. And I always have to recalibrate. Constantly aware. I've made the analogy before that it's kind of like diabetes where you have to monitor your blood sugar, you know? Because I'm bipolar, but I can't take the medication that's usually used for it. I was put on lithium and I got serotonin syndrome.
So the first 2 weeks you described, you were isolated, then you kind of open up to other people. Is there something that you feel like you clicked or you acquired specifically in Heritage? You mentioned learning that you have to slow down so that people will listen to you. Is this actually occurred in Heritage?
It did feel to me a bit, it was like a between school, summer camp, and jail, basically, is what it felt like, you know? And I just wanted to get through it. And I wanted to do a good job. I'm a perfectionist. And that was another big thing that played into self-doubt. If I couldn't do something perfectly, I didn't want to do it. I was terrified of making mistakes.
But then, if I understand correctly, you would try to perform and please the expectations people had on you. You wanted to do good because you didn't want to go back to jail.
Yes.
But that was
yes.
for yourself.
Yes, and I wanted to change my life. I did. I'm not a people pleaser. I'm not motivated by what other people want. I'm motivated by what I want. And, that can be interpreted as me being selfish, but really it's not, because I work on myself so much, and that just makes me easier to deal with for the rest of the world. But it's like you can change the world by like changing yourself, like, the change starts from within. And it really is true. I've noticed that, moods are contagious also, so if you have a positive outlook, the people around you tends to kind of rub off on them. So I learned like the basics at Heritage, but most of my learning came from groups, cause that was like, and I initially started doing it to look good for the court, but at the same time, if I'm in here, might as well take advantage of it. I love to learn. I understood who I was as a person, my beliefs and values and my identity, but I didn't understand emotions. And it is something that I never made an attempt to understand because I didn't realize that I had to. But just gaining that self-awareness, showed me the things that I needed to work on. And everything just became clearer and clearer, like 2 days ago or for the past 2 days. But I started to doubt myself. And that really, really scared me. I saw the spiral starting to happen. I knew logically that nothing was wrong. I was fine. But I still felt the feelings. I was still crying. I was still upset. I still needed to trauma dump on somebody, even though I logically knew everything that was going on. But it was really hard because I hadn't felt those feelings in so long. So that's something new I'm dealing with, because I have this period of like euphoria that lasted like a long time. Like I always had energy issues. I didn't really understand them. So I had 2 months where I was just like asleep. And then I got really sick, the worst cold I ever had in my life, for a week. And then when I got better, I was manic as fuck. But I recognized what was happening because I knew what psychosis was, because I had serotonin syndrome before. So like I recognized the things.
I'm interested in what happened when you got out of Heritage, because you mentioned you needed to show up for court. Going back to real life, what was it for you?
It wasn't like starting again from scratch, but I got out of there and I realized I needed to take all of my medications, so I started taking them again. I had a boyfriend at the time who, like, I basically was just with him because my parents couldn't handle listening to me and I needed emotional support, and it was very transactional, but I needed it at the time, and it helped me so much to have someone at home to talk to who was understanding and supportive. But I knew it wasn't going to work out. Like, I'm not a romantic in any sense of the word. I was too scared to break up with him, so he broke up with me. So I was a little insulted for like a couple of weeks, but then I got over it. The real hard thing that happened was one of my cats died. After I got out, I felt super guilty. I couldn't take care of her when she was sick because I was too fucked up, Cause like my sobriety kind of came in stages, right? The first time I got arrested, they just like warned me. Then I violated my conditions once and I spent like the night in the drunk tank. Then I got arrested again and I spent 2 nights at LeClaire prison. And I didn't learn my lesson from that. I didn't. And, about a year later, I was one of those people who would like manipulate their pharmacist. They said I lost all my clonazepams and like, I didn't, and then so I got a whole new one, and I'd taken a bunch of them, and like I only started drinking alcohol problematically as a means of making the benzos, like I keep saying, work better, which is not the right way to describe it. Be more potent is really.
Yeah.
So yeah, and I didn't do anything that bad, but I was where I wasn't supposed to be. Like I have to tell too many details of the story. I was just sitting in a park and not doing anything really, but I wasn't supposed to be in that area, and I got arrested again. And because it was like the third time, I had to be in jail for longer. I've seen stories of people being in prison for months under horrible conditions. It was 5 days and I'm, a spoiled little Jewish girl. Like I've seen shit that most people with my upbringing have not seen. Well, I definitely have. And I'm grateful that I've seen that other side of life.
When you got to spend 5 days in prison, this is
Yeah.
where you start to realize like your privilege and the things that you were taking for granted might be taken away from you at some point if you didn't
Yeah.
get your shit together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So when you say you're happy it happened this way because you needed that to happen, like you mean it. What got you into Heritage got you out of Heritage, and then I believe if I summarize, you had a boyfriend. It was not meant for long, but it helped you stay connected and get your shit together, being stable in some capacity. You've said another thing as well, very important, is you mentioned the group, which if I can just clarify for the audience, you're referring to our alumni support group for the people that went to Heritage and Seeridge.
Yes.
Which we actually met from.
Yes. Yes. I mean, I think a lot of you guys know each other from like being at like either Seeridge or Heritage at the same time. Like I didn't know anybody from the groups, but I started going to the groups because it would look good for court, same thing. But
So you were still not going there entirely for yourself. Like you didn't see the value in group at the beginning.
I did, but I just didn't want to do it because, it was like schoolwork or something. For most of my life, I've been starved for attention, and it was a place where I would get attention, where I could talk, and I love to fucking talk. But it was a place where I got to not initially be heard because of my ineffective communication style, but like some people did hear me. And there was that one person who I was able to trust initially and who I glommed onto. But she became kind of like a surrogate like mother to me, even though she's younger than me. Through her, I started to trust other people. I never liked the serious meetings. Like, I liked the women's meeting, which was never serious. And the music meetings are my favorite meetings. Cause for me, I'm not a serious person. And it's not like I'm not taking it seriously, but like, I'm taking it seriously in an unserious fashion. Like, there's so many people. And there were people who weren't in a great place. Sometimes just hearing those depressing things, it doesn't help me, like I'm very sensitive and it can affect my mood.
So you connect better in smaller group, more intimate settings, and where you can be expressive of your personality or being real with the way you feel without holding back because you have to respect the room or whatever.
And probably respect the time of others too.
Exactly. And I didn't realize that at the beginning because I didn't know I was not socialized, I was like a feral animal.
Yeah, I can see that.
Because I didn't spend any time around people, so I didn't know how to people please because I didn't understand people. I felt like an alien, I felt like I was a different species than everybody else.
But ultimately, you develop connection and real relationship in those rooms. For the very first time in your life, you had people you can reach out to and vice versa. So having a community, I think you said earlier, it is what changed and helped you actually stay.
It keeps me grounded. It keeps me from floating off into the clouds or falling into a pit, It's like an accurate reflection of yourself because it's very hard to see yourself accurately. It's crucial for me to maintain this self-awareness, like constantly, The group was my university of me because I understood myself within the context of myself, but I didn't understand myself within the context of the world, if that makes sense.
How you perceived by others, perhaps.
Yeah.
Eric often says that he doesn't really care for feedback in group.
I said I don't need it and I don't care if I have it.
I have a hard time understanding this because I need that feedback. I need somebody to bounce what I just said so that it goes further. And I understand, like you need to get it out, and once it is out, Eric, you're done. If it's added bonus if you get something out of a feedback, but for me that's really important. So that's a key difference between me and Eric. And to that, Michelle, my question: you said it's essential to validate yourself with others and trying to see where you fit in within the group, but is it more expressing yourself, letting it out, or the feedback that you receive from others that is important to you?
It's both. It depends on my mood. Honestly, if I have a lot going on in my head, I don't want to hear. It's too much already and I can't handle it. But sometimes I want to hear someone's opinion. Whenever I have like a feeling, now it's like, why am I having this feeling? Why do I feel this way? Constantly. I'm always doing that because I don't want to lose this peace that I've found, you know, and I'm this balance, this place in the middle. It's like I'm so desperate to hang on to that, you know, that's what keeps me motivated. Being as happy as I possibly can is my focus because for me, that's what allows me to live the life that I want to live. So for other people, maybe that's not their focus, but for me, really, at the end of the day, my focus is happiness because in my opinion, if I'm happy with my life, then what's the problem? And for me to be happy with my life, I have to have a good life. I have to be a good person. Doing right things and being a good person have no negative, like, unless you're doing it for wrong reasons or you're being stupid about it. If you just making bad decisions, it's a bad idea. We have this kind of part of us sometimes get to do this bad thing, you know, but like, why? That I don't even get yet, you know? Like in the music meeting lately, try to play like the songs that are stuck in my head. And there's this one song by my second favorite artist of all time, Julian Casablancas, it's like the Strokes, from their last album called Bad Decisions. And it's like making bad decisions with you. And
Drop down the lights, I'm sitting with you. Moscow. Hey, I don't know how to use the power 'cause I can't. I can't make anymore.
I'm like, why the fuck are you saying that? You know, like, why are you encouraging people to make bad decisions? But like, you can't blame people for expressing themselves the way that they want to. But art imitates life and life imitates art. I mean, I'm an artist. I'm a visual, I do abstract expressionism. It's obviously a lot more vague of a message because I don't even know what I'm expressing when I'm doing it. And music has words and different types of music, like minor key and major key, like they actually give us feelings. So it's a much more obvious message. When people are making music, I think sometimes it's complete fiction. Sometimes it's complete reality. Most of the time it's a combination of the two. There are songs and like that literally have helped me overcome big obstacles in my life. I'm going to mention one song, which is Let It Be. And it's just the way the music sounds. It brings catharsis, you know? And basically I never had anyone who would understand me or say, that's not true. I had my grandmother. And when she died, I pretty much lost the will to live because she was so important to me. And that song is about his deceased mother coming to him in a dream and telling him, let it be. Just accept things and let them be. And acceptance is so important. Like, number one thing for me was gratitude. Number two is acceptance. Because I have accepted every shitty choice I've made. I've accepted every bad thing that's happened to me. I had never been a person who listened to song lyrics, you know, but I started to because I started to recognize the feelings that the artists were expressing in myself. I never had done that before because I didn't understand my emotions. I didn't understand other people's emotions.
Your relationship to music that came in as a way for you to regulate your emotions.
Yeah, it's so powerful. For me, the Beatles, it's simplified yet powerful because usually when things are simple, it's hard to do simple well. The messages are so clear and the music is so good. And John Lennon was great, but like Paul McCartney, like John Lennon was like a genius. Paul McCartney, he might be God walking among us. Like, I don't understand how that man exists. All of his songs are lessons, the not silly ones, like Rocky Raccoon is not a lesson, but like really they're life lessons.
So you've mentioned that the group is where everything happened for you in terms of making progress and all. But I'm curious, back when you were still at Heritage, were you already attending the group, or is there like a disconnect? At some point you left at Heritage and then came to group after? Or that was in continuous?
Once a week thing where you like had to do it while you were there, right?
But what about the groups, like the workshop groups? Like, did you connect with anybody there?
Yeah, I did. Towards the end, I felt like I fit in more. There was people who I had a lot in common with. There was 2 other Jews there. But yeah, like I really did. None of those relationships lasted afterwards. Like there's a few people I tried to message or something, but like addicts are flighty people. You don't know what happens to them. Not everyone, continues to work when they leave, I suppose. And some people, maybe their path is different.
So statistically, we're talking about 98% of the people don't pursue sobriety after treatment. 98%. You're the 2%er. So you're one of the few.
Well, when I took my PSATs in high school, I got in the 97th percentile, so like I'm always up there. Yeah, second highest score in the history of my school.
Nice.
So you went to group, to meetings after leaving Heritage because it would be looking good for court. You knew there was something valuable for you in there, but you wouldn't have done it for yourself because, well, don't want to commit, let's say, to sobriety or whatnot.
It wasn't about sobriety. It was about committing to do anything. I just, like, if someone told me to do something, I just didn't want to do it. It's still a thing I struggle with. You know, if I have work to do, like I just don't want to do it, but I'll compulsively do other work that is I don't need to do. That's still a thing that I deal with. Like, and then like it's easier. It's like it's easier to like do someone else's work than your own. You know?
So you were talking about coping mechanism that's procrastination, right? When the thing you have to do or you should be doing is stressing you out, that you do whatever else and you do it good, but you don't do what you have to do.
Or shut down completely. The other thing I would do is shut down completely. Like in school, a lot of times, like around exams, that's when I would go into like it's fight or flight. You know, I would either be like up all night and like so I would only start studying like the night before, or like I would have a paper due at 9 a.m. and I would start it at 6 a.m. Like, but I would do really well on them, and like it was either that or everything became so overwhelming that I just shut down. And that's the bipolar thing that I taught myself a long time ago. Doctors failed to recognize because I had other things that masked some of the symptoms of it. And also I would only go to the doctor when I was depressed. I wouldn't complain about the other thing. I just kept getting borderline, but borderline, it's an inability to regulate your emotions. At a certain point in your life, you learn how to control your emotions. And the people who never do that, that's borderline personality disorder. And I probably had it. I had most of the traits.
When you got out of Heritage, you did well. You started doing meetings, but where were you at in terms of your meds and your diagnosis? Were you really thorough with your appointments and all that?
Yeah, I mean, I had to be for the courts. I wanted to be a good girl. But it's also the same thing like before. I would avoid everything. I didn't want to do anything, so I would miss appointments. And I didn't take care of myself because I didn't care about myself. You know, I wanted someone else to take care of me or something. Like I didn't want to put in the effort. Well, eventually, slowly, it wasn't like overnight, but I really internalized that like doing the thing you're supposed to do and not putting it off makes things easier. Like avoiding it is not easy. That makes things harder. You can know that on an intellectual level, but it's very hard to feel that. You know? And it's not until you kind of develop a pattern of doing those things and you realize the goodness kind of multiplies exponentially, that you start doing it more automatically, you know? And I still struggle with that. Like I had a period where I didn't work for 2 months and I'm just starting again and it's hard. Like I'm finding myself procrastinating. I wasn't working from home before, and now like I can't work from home because if I'm home, I will do something else. If I go to the gym, I need to have a trainer or I'm just not going to go, you know? I need something to hold me accountable to do the thing I need to do. It's like jail.
So again, you learn about yourself, then you function better over the time. And as the longer you are outside of your comfort zone, the more growth you have. You describe it, I think, with the joy of it, that you can appreciate that you're doing good and you're proud of yourself for a very good reason.
Yeah, and also doing things that are scary make them less scary the more you do them. So that for me is very important because what I'm working on most now is building relationships with people, trusting people, knowing who to trust and not to trust, not taking things personally. You know, most of the time I'm very, like, I have a thick skin and I don't give a shit what people think about me until I do. And then I really, really, really give a shit, you know? That's something I'm working on now because I'm hypersensitive to everything. That's an Asperger's thing also. Little thing that somebody might do might have a huge impact on me, you know, and that's still the remnants of borderline, I think. But the vast majority of the time that does not happen, but sometimes something happens that triggers something from my past, reminds me of something that I did before, my past behavior. And I think those are the things that upset me. You know, when you recognize your own behavior in other people, your own bad behavior, previous bad behavior in other people, that's what happened to me recently that threw me off.
When I see people that are drinking, like the way it changed their behaviors, that shit keeps me sober because I see myself and how stupid I was or disrespectful I've been when I see other people get drunk. So yeah, I relate with what you're saying. Like
that makes sense.
the thing that we have improved onto, but people that have the same behavior we used to have is definitely uncomfortable. You have something like that, Eric?
Not the way you describe it. Not drinking, anyways. Yeah, I don't identify with other drinkers when I see them. I don't see myself, but I'm very cognizant of the fact that when I was drinking and when I was using drugs, I was very super aware of all my surroundings. I would say I was less likely to lose control doing that than if I was not under any influence in some ways. Socially, I'm talking about. It's not like I'm going to come across anyone like me because I'm not in somebody's house in depression, drinking themselves to death, right? Basically. So
Valid point.
that's kind of
Yeah.
hard to replicate unless you know,
If you overstep some people's boundaries, right, you would have to overstep majorly
yeah,
on people's boundaries
exactly.
to experience that. I get it.
That's the type of stuff that you get when you're like hypomanic and like things start to seem like I know that it's not real.
That pattern seeking too, so I know you don't do that.
Yeah. No, it's pattern recognition. But that's how I understand that I am not receiving messages from the beyond, you know, like, cause it feels really real because the way that I learn is it's like very scientific method. I try and see things from every angle. I try to just understand why my brain is doing the things that I do, and it allows me to separate myself from my emotions and see what I'm doing from a different perspective, which is so important.
Yeah, because you're in our group, so I know that you kind of you have an opinion on that. How should I say that? Higher power, or as you describe it, voices from beyond. I'm not sure that's how other people describe it.
Michelle, what you just described, right? Knowing that it is pattern recognition
Yeah.
makes all the difference between you and somebody who doesn't know much about themselves and think that whatever perception is reality and they are on a god mode or whatever,
Yeah.
like Kanye West kind
Yeah.
of shit.
Yeah, that's what it feels like. And it's an amazing feeling, but that's the thing where I know I have to keep myself grounded. I have all these bracelets that say balance on them that I make because I don't get tattoos at this place and not let myself float out into the clouds because I feel those delusions of grandeur happening. You kind of have to moderate that also, because you want to maintain your confidence.
Maybe a little, but it's hard. Doubtful.
Yeah, like
why don't you get tattoos? Is it a religious thing or just you don't like it?
Okay, there's different reasons. Non-conformist thing. I don't like to be like everybody else, and everybody else has tattoos, so I like to not have any. And I also am an artist. I don't want someone else putting their work on me because I won't like it. I'll find something wrong with it. And I'm very fickle. I don't like the same things for long periods of time. I get really into something and then I'm, so I don't know that I'm going to want to be looking at the same thing for the rest of my life. Yeah.
So you can change your hairstyle, you can change your clothes, but tattoos are too permanent for your liking.
And that's exactly how I was at your age. I was going to come back since we like to have a little drama on the podcast because it makes for good viewing. And it's my favorite subject. I believe in the phrase from Dr. Ellis. I know you know it too, and I've mentioned it quite often in my shares. People feel how they think. It's something I try to stress often. It starts here. If you can work on this, it really extends to a lot of other things. You talked about your mood. You're usually trying to be in a good mood. You're trying to be happy. You said positivity and being happy is like what you want to be. You know this because you know where it leads.
Experience, yeah, past experiences. I feel so much better than I ever have at any point in my life, Circumstances haven't changed very much, but the way I feel has changed so drastically because I've, come to these realizations. The phrase that I remember is perception is reality, because that also applies to other people. So I don't believe in objective truth. I mean, I was a philosophy major. I don't think you can know anything with any certainty other than either your own consciousness or that there is consciousness in general. Yeah,
I was about to say that it's good when you get to that realization is that you don't have to convince anybody else. You don't have to agree with anybody else because your perception of reality is as valid as anybody else's. And for me, that was a large part of my growing up towards sobriety.
You know what? I studied philosophy in school and I had all this shit in the back of my brain and I didn't know how to apply it. But going to the meetings and stuff, like put the pieces together, it's like the neural pathways in my brain are configuring themselves and all these pieces of information that I've acquired over the years started to make sense. It's like a narrative or whatever, because I just had bits and pieces of information, but they weren't connected. I spent so much time sitting alone, smoking weed and watching like documentary. It all sunk in there and I like acquired a ton of information, but none of it was about like, because IQ and EQ, I was all IQ and no EQ. So once I started developing my emotional intelligence, all of this information I had access to all of a sudden. And that has been such a powerful tool for me. Like I had like a library up in here that I didn't have access to before, but now I do.
Yeah. And I think it's safe to say that your shares in our groups are perceived as always coming from a different perspective than most people in the groups, which I always enjoy because it's refreshing to hear another point of view. But I'm a bit biased because a lot of what comes out kind of confirms some of my biases as well, right?
Where we have something in common in this room, the three of us, is neurodivergence. At different degrees, the three of us are obviously on the spectrum. And it makes for like an intuitive understanding between neurodivergent people.
Yeah.
I have a problem with taking things literally, and it's in the group situation where I've learned to better understand it, what I might be thinking at the time, and just shut up and listen.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's just I've grown this understanding of human behavior, that I had no concept of before. And it's pattern recognition also, but like I recognize the little bits and pieces of myself and all the other people. And then I started to understand how my parents operated because like I know them very well, and from that it just extrapolated, other people. So I see there's certain personality types that people have. If you meet someone with this personality type, like you're going to meet other people with that personality type and you see the similarities. It makes it a lot easier to judge people in a good way, like discernment, not being judgmental, like looking down on someone, but seeing them for who they really are, which is a thing that neurodivergent people struggle with a lot. That's also played into my trust issues. Couldn't trust people because I didn't know when people were lying. I couldn't, that's a trait that I like, that I share with my father and, my brother, like it runs in the family. And, that's how I realized that I was neurodivergent. They don't diagnose it in adults, but my, younger brother was diagnosed a long time ago. And like from that, I see it in my father. And, yeah, and that's understanding my brain. It's an ongoing process, but like I see where all the parts of me come from. I see the depression from my father's side. I see the anxiety from my mother's side. Like I see where all those things are, but I also see the good things that I got from, they're both very intelligent people. And so, that had to come from somewhere. And like strong people, like especially my grandparents, were strong people. And that gave me so much motivation because they were such survivors, the things that they had to endure and the things that they accomplished. I'm not putting down my parents in any way, but like you have a different relationship with your parents and you tend to judge them more harshly than you do your grandparents, at least for me, because you have more expectations of your parents. I have lost the idea of having role models, kind of, and it was gaining the ability to look back at my past and remember things without being afraid of the pain that allowed me to like remember things that my grandmother and my grandfather had done. And like that just like inspired me to like, like on my dad's side, his parents are Holocaust survivors, and just the fact that someone was able to endure the story is incredible. And I come from these survivors. That means that I have that strength in me too. So that's why I survived. I could have died because I didn't care if I lived or died. I wasn't going to actively kill myself because I'm too passive of a person to do that. But, I didn't give a shit. I wish I had never been born. I really, really, really did. But now I am just grateful to have the opportunity to have been given a life to live. What are the odds of that happening? I'm so insignificant, like in the grand scheme of things. And some people think of that like it's not comforting, but for me it is. You don't matter in a way gives you a kind of freedom, you know? There's a branch of philosophy called absurdism, and that's where this falls under. And it's the same thing of taking a lighthearted approach to serious issues, because it just makes it easier. It just does. I don't want to be depressed and upset anymore. I want to be joyful. I want to be good. I want to be productive. I want to be happy. I want to make other people happy. I want the best for other people. I don't wish harm upon anybody. I don't have any anger anymore because I understand that people who do shitty things do that because of shitty things that have happened to them and shitty DNA and whatever circumstances they had to deal with.
Your understanding of other people behaviors or the errors that they've done, it's because you have made that work on yourself to forgive yourself for the things that you did or things that happened that you had no control over, but that you know better today, right? Because for me, it is at that moment that I've started to be much more compassionate towards others and much more understanding. When I was been able to be compassionate with myself.
I had to forgive myself first 100% before I could forgive other people. And it's really shame and guilt. Those are the things that were holding me back. I would dwell on my past and just regret my decisions and not realize that those bad decisions ultimately would lead to good things. And I'm grateful for every bad decision that I made, which is contradicting what I said earlier. But because they led to a lot of good decisions, I hope to keep making good decisions. And I want to now. Like, I'm so afraid of fucking up, you know? I want to be happy. That's like the greatest motivator. Cause when you have a prolonged period of time when you feel good, you want to hold on to that. And, that was what was so scary when I had that kind of like little dip the past couple of days. It freaked me the fuck out. Because I thought I wasn't going to get back to where I was, but I had forgotten that feelings were temporary.
Well, I can identify with a lot of what you said, and you probably know because you've heard my shares. And I too didn't know how to connect with people. I've said this often. For me, it did start at Heritage, and then the rooms were an extension of that. Was able to, like you said, find something to relate with almost every single person, and even though it wasn't exactly me, it wasn't exactly identical. Then I was able to with therapy too as well, use this as a vehicle to look inside myself, and much like you talked about, self-forgiveness and self-esteem and self-compassion, which was really lacking in me.
Yes.
It started to happen in this last 6 months, and much like you, also to talk about positivity and I want to be happy. I realize that happiness is not a general mood all the time, that, there will be things, but I appreciate even the moments that are not happy now. I'm sorry that you had a few days where you didn't quite feel like yourself. Did you isolate or did you?
No,
those 3 days?
I reached out like right away. I didn't fully understand what I was feeling. I understood most of it, but I had to kind of mull over it a bit to put the pieces together to understand exactly why my mood had changed. But I did reach out immediately because I knew that had helped me in the past. And of course it helped again. I kind of put the pieces together of why I was feeling the way I was feeling. I wasn't isolating, but in my moments where I'm by myself, that's where it starts to get scary because I don't have other people to keep me grounded in reality, you know?
Right.
But I didn't let myself get that far because I'm so vigilant about staying balanced. So I really, really didn't want to spiral. And I knew I wasn't going to, but I still felt those bad feelings, you know? I still felt them. Even though I knew that they weren't useful and I and I logically knew that nothing was wrong. You know, I wasn't angry at anybody. I wasn't blaming anybody for anything, but the feelings still were there. Cause I hadn't had this happen yet in this current state of my life. And things are changing so fast, you know? It's adjusting. What is it? Recalibrating. That's the word that I picked up recently to describe it. I used to say course correct, but I like recalibrate. But that's what I'm always doing. And, that's what's keeping me in line and allowing me to be the person who I want to be.
You know, I'll just harp back a little bit to what you said. You've kind of talked about it, about your experiences and how it's really shaped your philosophy, your way of thinking now. I know you've heard me talk about that, almost the way you opened when you talked about you used to be very cynical, you know, all that stuff. I was very much the same way. And then I somehow, that was part of my personality almost in my 20s. And then addiction came along a little bit in my 30s. I played with it. I got in and out of it. And then after some events and my mother passing and my father passing, I went into a spiral.
Yeah.
I've often said this after going through heritage. And when I came out on the other side, now I didn't find God or anything like that, but there was an awakening in how I perceived things and how I perceived myself. And I think it was more of myself. I think I realized that if I wanted to be happier, I needed to change how I was behaving, how I was regulating my emotions, and how I was expressing myself, which wasn't very often, right? So I often talk about how I'm a better person in recovery than I ever was, ever,
For sure.
in a lot
For
of ways,
sure.
perhaps as a child. But so
I was miserable as a child.
yeah, well, I was fine as a child, but I look at my recovery state, my recovery period as a reset. You talk about recalibrating. I talk about a
Yeah.
reset. I often say, and people will disagree with me, I'll say, I'm happy that I'm an addict. I'm happy that I'm an addict in recovery. And they'll say, well, you're happy to be a recovering addict. No, no, no. I'm happy I was an addict, and I'm happy I am an addict, right, in recovery. But I'm happy that I was an addict because I think I would have went through life whatever that course correction. You understand what I mean? So
Yeah.
without it, I wouldn't be where I am now, or I would be just chugging along the same old
Yeah.
way.
I feel
And it's
exactly.
like your stint in jail and going through heritage and all these other things, slowly piece things together at the right time, the right age. I guess it took me to be at a different, much later age to piece this all together. But I'm happy and I'm of acceptance of my past. And now I'm at that stage where I'm like, much like you talked about, where
Yeah.
I don't want shame and guilt and I deal with it in therapy and I'm learning to forgive and love myself.
Yeah. Like, I still, like, feel very different than most people, but I like myself. So I like my idiosyncrasies and like I don't know how to be anybody else, you know? So I don't want to change my past. I don't want to relive it. I don't want to relearn those lessons. And I know that I used to think you don't get wounded along the way, you don't grow, you know? So, like, the more hardships you experience and survive, the stronger a person you become. And I even see it people who I've grown up with who haven't gone through the experiences that I have. They don't understand how people are, and I think that affects people's ability to be compassionate and empathetic. And those were things that
Have
I had to
gratitude.
learn.
Yeah. Yeah.
Gratitude, like, yeah, people who have everything, who have lives that people would die to have, complaining about the most minor things. And it's disappointing is what it is.
Well, you said it, right? To heal, you need to be wounded, right?
Yeah,
Those two words, the phrase goes together, right? You heal from your wounds. So if you're
yeah,
not wounded, or if you're not a naturally self-reflective, look inward type of person, you're just going to stroll through life as you are, right? I wounded myself enough to make myself a better person. Now, I don't know if that was on purpose, but I sure as hell didn't like the person I was, so I tried to get rid of it.
Just to do a summary of everything we touched on, essentially, you were sent to rehab at a point where you were lost. You didn't know much about yourself and how to regulate, and you didn't have connection with anybody, and throughout the time, all those things came one after the other. Self-discovery, self-management, self-understanding, and then balance through it out. And as you mentioned, like a couple of days ago, you lost your balance. You felt really, really lost, right? But you are now in a position where you find your balance over time. You know your place and how to adjust yourself. And you said as well that now that you've done all that growing up and up to the point where you have connection, you're building more friendship. I think you said earlier, like you're kind of now seeking for perhaps something more romantic in terms of connections, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'm figuring that out. I don't think I'm ready for anything very serious at this point. I never learned how to date or anything, you know, like I didn't start until I was really old. Think I need to experience more before I know what I really want. I have a general idea, but I have trouble recognizing that in people. It's hard to put the two together. I know the type of person that I want, but it's hard for me to see that in people. So that's something that I'm learning, to be more comfortable around people in a healthy way, because it takes me a long time to get comfortable with someone. And the way that dating works these days, how's that going to happen? I am very, very adamant about not getting involved with anybody from the groups. I think that's a terrible idea. And
Healthy boundaries.
yeah. And so I have to figure that out. I didn't think I was lovable before. Now I'm pretty sure I am. I don't like being alone, but I'm fine with being single. I don't need to be in a relationship, but I can't be isolated. So as long as I have people in my life, just like in general, makes things better because I'm just doing activities with people, even if it's not the ultimate goal is not like permanent love. It's gaining new experiences, trying to understand myself and other people within that context. It's a lot of new stuff for me because before I was just kind of winging it. And there's a lot about this stuff that I still don't understand. It's the area in which I know the least, but it's definitely somewhere where I need to make progress because I truly believe that there's value in any relationship. So if I meet someone and I'm with them for a few years and then I meet somebody else, like, I'm fine with that too.
I love how you see it, and I just wanted to say that well, it took some time for you to reach a certain point where you're comfortable with your own person, knowing yourself, and learning to know about another human. Every human are complex, just like we are ourselves, right? So it doesn't happen overnight. It doesn't happen on dating apps.
I've seen marriages happen through dating apps, but I'll figure it out. It's one step at a time. You can only face what's directly in front of you, only become important when you get there. So it's really the same old shit, living in the moment. Those past couple of days where I wasn't feeling myself, it's because I had stopped living in the moment and I had to get back there. The groups, I can't speak highly enough about them because really it's a place where I found community in a world where community is very hard to find, especially for someone like me who's fearful of people. It takes a long time for me to get to know someone, and I will give up very quickly because I don't trust people. And in these groups, people stay there and they're like, we're gonna love you till you love yourself, all that stuff. But and I did love myself. I honestly did. I just didn't think anybody else would, And that's one of those other things where I don't identify with people. I didn't have that same kind of it's because I hated my body, I think is what it came from. So once I became comfortable with the way I looked, comfortable with the person who I am, that's what happened. My first addiction was food. Food controlled my life. You know how they say, eat to live, don't live to eat? Now, I mean, I still have weird food issues, like ordering Uber Eats that I don't eat and stuff like that. It's a weird problem that I can't get over. So I still have this desire to acquire food, but I don't want to eat. I only eat when I'm hungry. Disease of more. Yeah.
You're buying it, let it rot.
I order Uber Eats and then I'll fall asleep and I'll order too much. I'm learning to pare down what I order. But still, sometimes when I'm upset and tired, I will order Uber Eats and then fall asleep. And it's just food.
You did mention that when you eat, you fall asleep. So it's kind of like a natural recurring event here.
yeah, I guess,
So
yeah,
I see where.
the fact of ordering the food is getting you the dopamine you need, and then you go to sleep. You don't need to eat. You need to order food.
it totally is. You're totally right. That's exactly what it is. Yeah, it is dopamine for me to order from Uber Eats. I don't. This is so silly, but you're right. I mean, you try and find it where you can. There are healthier ways, but there are also much less healthy ways than that. It's something I need to work on,
No
but
shit.
it's not. It's not like Xanax. It's not the same.
That's exactly what I had in head. It's much better to order food than to eat fucking Xanax like there's no tomorrow.
Yeah, because
Definitely.
you might end
Yeah.
up in prison.
Yeah, well, before, like, I was like eating was too complicated, so I just would take speed. I was like, oh, this is easier. It's cheaper. I'm not recommending this to anybody. Let me make
I've
that
said
clear.
worse.
That's exactly that, but that's what it was. Like, literally, it was cheaper. It was like $4 for speed, and like that, you can't buy that much like food for $4, especially now with inflation. Although I don't
No.
know what speed costs anymore. Thankfully, it's probably more.
But anyways, I don't want to
It's
know.
nothing like what we lived through, but it's true, right? At certain point, especially if you add not that much money available, that could be a way to survive. And
Your priorities become
I've
out
been
of
there.
whack, and it's like any money
Yeah.
you get, that's where it goes. I would much rather spend, if I had cash, I was going to spend it on drugs. I was not going to spend it on food because my priorities were fucked.
Because I don't fear hunger. I don't
Yeah.
fear hunger as much as I used to fear my emotions.
Well, I never feared, it was just, food was just a coping mechanism. It was comfort. And I also had this thing where I never felt full, which is like a medical thing that some people have. But I never felt full. So I would just eat and eat and eat and eat, and there was no end to it. And I would also, every morning I would be, okay, today I'm going to starve myself. So I would not eat all day, and then I would be starving by the end of the day, and then I would then I would be disappointed in myself, and then I'd eat more. It's a vicious cycle. What other addicts like experience with their DOCs, I went through with food for so much of my life, and it really made the process of recovering from the other addictions much easier because I had lived it in a way that is much more complicated. Because food is something you cannot give up. It's more than addictive food. It's necessary, you know? So that's a
Yeah.
very, very complicated addiction to have because you can't abstain. But I looked at, there's an Overeaters Anonymous because I do the 12-step meetings also mostly because I was trying to understand them because it didn't make sense to me. And then once I understood it, the way I said it was like I translated it into Michelle. Like blind faith is not a thing that I do. I'm not going to give myself up to the will of God. I'm not going to do that because I don't know that
Why
there's a
not?
God. Because I don't know what's out there. I don't know. I'm an agnostic, and for me, that's my form of humility.
That's a very interesting way that you put it, because you know the name of the podcast, right?
Yeah.
12-Step Crashers.
Yeah.
It came from originally a bit of curiosity and also the assumption that we can go into any 12-step meeting with a smart mindset, and it would fit perfectly with what we're trying to achieve, and our share will be pertinent in that room.
But I kept going because I didn't understand and I wanted to understand, and I kept going until it made sense to me. And then that allowed me to see things from other people's perspective, which is so important. And that's like a big problem in the world, is that we've lost the ability to put ourselves in other people's shoes and understand why they're behaving the way they're behaving. We've lost our ability to be compassionate, to have empathy. And I was definitely an example of that. And I don't want to go back to that place because that's where problems originate, you know, that's where all conflict originates. So it's from lack of understanding. And
it kind of brings me back to a full circle to the concept that what we said earlier, the perception of reality is relative from a person to the other. And once you understand conceptually the path that the steppers are on, it makes much more sense, and it's easier to relate and understand where they're at. You don't need to agree to get along.
Yeah, I mean, this is like veering off topic a little bit, but the way that it's formatted is very much modeled after Christianity, which involves blind faith. Like you have to give your, well, like whatever, accept Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior, versus where my religious background, which is more of a cultural background, you don't have to believe anything to be Jewish. It's about who you are. It's about who your mother is. It's about shared history. It's about traditions. It's about survival. And that's a huge part of my identity. I wanted to understand, so I kept going. I also kept going because the people who I felt comfortable with initially were in those meetings, you know, some of them, one person in particular. It gave me perspective that I would never have had otherwise because I don't know if there's a greater power. There might not be, you know, because like I was taught to question everything, which is another very Jewish thing to do.
Have you ever heard about my hypothesis about higher powers?
I
No,
don't believe that I have.
So Eric touched on one thing earlier, and you said like you want to be happy, therefore you set your mind to be happy, and it starts from there. And I believe strongly in this. Like I am in control, and I am in power of each of my decisions. Therefore, if there's going to be conceptually an higher power, it has to be me. It has to be coming from
I
within.
know.
And
Yes.
I'm not saying
Yeah.
this with a God complex. I'm saying this with, I'm going to surrender to that guy, but to nobody else, though.
I had to regain my power, so I was not going to admit that I was powerless against anything, you know, because I felt powerless before. So that word, there's a lot of words that just trip me up. I don't like that. I don't like character defects because I don't think I have character defects. I think I have things that I need to work on, but I'm not defective. I'm just slightly out of order, you know?
Yeah.
But
Well,
this is
I
all
like science,
semantics.
and in science, you cannot remove parts of yourself. You cannot remove parts of yourself. It's not possible. You cannot pray
No,
them away. It's not possible.
that's right.
Well, you can. I had my gallbladder and most of my stomach removed.
Very good point. Not character
It's
defect.
biology, not a character defect. That's nothing to
I
do with your
know.
character.
No, but it is a part of me that is no longer a part of me.
I had a vasectomy recently, so yeah, valid point.
Congratulations. I mean, sugar and caffeine are addictive too, you know? I mean, they are drugs also. Like Mormons don't consume caffeine and stuff because it's too much for everything can be a drug, but it's when it's used improperly in excess, that's the problem. And there are some people who can't have any of something without going overboard. That's addiction. There's also different kinds of addiction and everyone has a different path because we are all unique in the same way that we're also all the same. That's a total contradiction, but it's the truth. Both! Both! It's the way you look at the world, and the world can be a beautiful place or an ugly place depending on the lens that you choose to look at it through, you know? Yeah, and I made the conscious choice to change fucking lenses.
Nice.
Love it. So, Michelle,
Yeah.
my question was to say, should people follow you at the place on social media?
Yes,
Or
please. Yes. So
Oh, what is it?
I have several Instagrams and a website that I haven't updated since 2019. But my name is Michelle, Michelle, Glay, Glay, G like George, L like Larry, A like asshole, Y like yellow.
you can give me your anchors offline, and I will add your anchors on the description
Yeah,
of the
yeah.
video on YouTube.
Yes. I will
But
do that.
Asshole Yellow, I love it.
A for asshole.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of them out there. We've all got one. At least one, hopefully.
Absolutely.
Okay.
On this, it has been absolutely delightful to have you on this podcast.
Yeah, like I'm just
No?
gonna plug, no, I'm gonna plug myself and my business. It's at Michelle Glay. I spelled it out before, but it'll probably be in the comments, in the thingy that's underneath on YouTube. I don't know what the hell you call it. Like and subscribe. Yeah. So this is very fun. I had, yeah.
Yeah, and this has been a pleasure to have you on. And I'm sure, especially for people that are in our group that will see this, I'm glad that you able to express yourself more openly, more freely, because obviously in groups we don't have a lot of time with shares. I feel like people are, yeah, I know you do, but I feel like now people have an overall of your journey and of your way of thinking and your philosophy going forward. I'm really glad to get to hear it because some of us sometimes feel misunderstood.
I feel like I know you better now, and everybody
So
that
do
will
I.
listen to the podcast will have a much better idea who Michel Glay is.
G as in George, L as in I don't remember, and A as in asshole. What was the Y?
Yellow.
Did she freeze?
I think she did. On this 12-step Crashers
Check out the meme
podcast.
page.
Don't forget the meme page.
Damn straight.
She's admirable, eh? That smell is something.